Have you got a tent that looks something like this? It's a very common design, but I think there are some ways that you can make them even better, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you now. This particular tent is a Taihang 2, but you'll find similar designs from all the major manufacturers. The strength of the tent comes from the tension between the two poles, and they need to be pulled apart, separated quite strongly. But if the tension between the two poles isn't good enough, you've got all kinds of problems. The guy lines ideally should be pulled forward to help pull the poles apart. But if we do that, they're going to go totally across the entrance to the vestibule, which is going to be a complete nightmare when you're getting in and out. So what we need to do is find a better way of getting those poles pulled apart. Now, some manufacturers achieve this by attaching the guy line to the top of the ventilation snout. Shall I call it a snout? And they'll pull it forward from there. Problem with that is that in bad windy, rainy weather, whatever, you don't necessarily want to have that snout pulled open. You might want to shut it down. So I've been investigating different ways to get a pull attached from the top of this hoop forwards, and I think I've come up with an ingenious solution. And here it is. So what is this bright idea, I hear you ask? Well, let me show you. I found some clips that are just the right size to clip over the pole inside this front sleeve, so I can hook basically the clip onto the pole and then attach a guy line to run it out to the front of the tent. These can be retrofitted. Can't be attached permanently, so you can just keep them in your rucksack or your peg bag or whatever in case of windy weather, and just clip them on and stretch the guy line out. And you can see that the edges of the clip are nicely rounded, so I don't think there's any danger of it puncturing the fabric or damaging it in any way. So that is enabling me to apply good tension from the top of the pole in the right direction. So you can see here how it's working. It's pulling that top hoop really nicely forward and strengthening it, and doing a much better job than the side guy lines ever could. And it's allowing me to have the side guy lines on the hoop pulling sort of outwards, if you like, and strengthening the hoop in that direction as well. So the two combined are a really powerful combination. For this to work best, we need to apply the tension across both hoops. So I've got a similar line here that I can attach onto the rear hoop and run that to a guy line as well. On this tent, the pegging out points are made from this webbing, which is about 15 millimeters wide, and I find that particularly on the small pegs that get supplied with the tent, it's very hard for that to grip onto the peg, and it slips off extremely easily. And also the range of movement that you get from the amount of tape you get given it is quite small. So I'm killing two birds with one stone here. What I've done is to add an extra loop of red Dyneema, and because it's just thin Dyneema, it's much better over the peg that I'm using. And the other benefit of adding a bit of a loop is that it gives you a bigger range of places where you can put in the peg. If you just had this webbing loop, you'd have a much smaller radius of areas where you could put in the peg, and that's not always easy in rocky pitches. So this gives me a much wider arc or area that I can use to find a pegging in point. The pegs at the front and rear, the four main load-bearing pegs, if you like, I think need to be a bit beefier than the ones that get supplied with the tent, because they're taking quite a lot of load and you depend on them quite a lot. So I use these much larger titanium pegs, and I put a really big, chunky, bright cord on them to make them easier to find and to pull in and out. You can't really see this one because it's buried half in the ground, so here's another one that shows you the length. They're about 16 centimeters long. They weigh next to nothing. They're titanium and they're extremely strong. I have never bent one of these. I'll put a link to where to get them in the description of the video. For what it's worth, I've retied all of the loops where the guy lines attach onto the tent, and I've made sure that I've used a Bolin knot on all of them. So there's another one down here, and also there's another one at the end of the guy line here. The Bolin is an excellent knot for creating a loop. I'll put a link on how to tie a Bolin in the description. Now, it's a lovely day today, nice, dry, warm and sunny, but of course that's not usually the case in the British Isles when we're wild camping. It's often windy, rainy, wet, we're tired. where you want to get the shelter up as quickly as possible with no fuss or mistakes. So what I've done to help myself as much as possible is I've color coded everything that goes at the windward end, if you like, the higher end of the tent. Everything at this end of the tent is color coded red, and that includes the start of the sleeve that the pole goes into. Also the pole itself, the bigger pole that goes at the front, has got a bit of red tape around it to make it easy to know which one's which. And the pegging out points at the front of the tent, I've used a bit of red Dyneema. So when I'm cold, tired and exhausted, I know that all the red points should be facing into the wind, and if I follow that, then I should be okay. So that makes it hopefully idiot proof for me, and it means that at the end of the day I can get things in the right place first time. Now the poles on the more expensive brands tends to have the ends fixed in, crimped in, so they can't come loose when you're sliding the poles in and out of the sleeves. But on this Taihang there's no such arrangement, and the bungee and the end fitting can easily sort of ping out of the pole, which can be a bit of a nuisance. So it's a simple matter of just applying a bit of glue and fixing it in to stop that little annoyance. So we've got good tension across the top of the tent now, but that still means we've got a large area of wall of the tent exposed to the wind. Now I always pitch the tent so the front vestibules are facing into the wind. I know this is a subject of some discussion and personal choice, but I'm pretty certain that's what I'd prefer to do. I've got a bit of a problem if the wind comes into the side of the tent here, because the wall's quite vertical, and if it starts to cave in a bit, it's going to catch the wind and we're going to have an issue. So this is how I've strengthened the side of the tent. I've used these clips on my Lanshan tent before, and they're very strong and easy to use. So I've basically placed this halfway along the foot of the side panel, and that's allowed me to attach a bungee out to a peg. Now these clips are great, but they don't need any sewing skills. You don't puncture the fabric at all, and you can move them around and adjust them. It is creasing it up a little bit, but once you remove the clip, if you need to, the fabric will relax back to its previous shape over time quite well, so you're not really damaging the tent in any way, which is ideal. So I've got a bungee out to a little peg, and that allows me to stabilize the side of the tent quite nicely. So you can see that that little point halfway along the base is adding a nice bit of tension to the wall of the tent, stop it collapsing inwards. So those are my modifications for the outside of the tent. Let's have a look inside the tent now and see what difference I can make there. Tunnel tents also give you a vast amount of interior space, and it feels spacious because the walls tend to be quite vertical, so the space is very usable as well. I think most tunnel tents have a similar attachment for the inner to the outer. So there's a hook and ring attachment, and it's those that create the tension and hang the tent from the inner. Now you can see on this Taihang there's very, very good separation between the inner and the outer, which is extremely healthy, if anything too generous. But there's a little bit, as you look down the tent, sort of can we call it sagginess? It's not very tight, and that's going to flap around in the wind, and I don't think we're getting quite as much internal space as we could do. So a couple of little things we can do to help improve that, I think. First thing I've done at the bottom is to shorten the bungee that connects the floor onto the ground hoop quite a lot. So basically I've double looped it and done it with a reef knot. If that's too tight, I can relax it on site, but that means that there's much more tension across the inner, and the inner's a lot flatter. Now the other thing I can do here is move this hook. So instead of going through the ring, it goes through the little bit of tape attaching the ring to the tent, and that's going to buy me about an extra centimetre of travel. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm going to do that now to all of the attachment points for the inner, see what difference it makes. Okay, so I've moved all those attachment points now, and I don't know if this is going to show up very well on the video, to be honest with you, but there's a lot more tension in the side panels. They're a lot more taut, they're not going to be flapping around so much, and it seems to be a bit more headroom as well. So instead of going through this ring, I put the hook now through the tape. Now I know that they're attached with a little piece of elastic, and so inevitably there's a centimetre's worth of give in that, but by just gaining that extra bit of pull out, it's just made the whole inner a bit more taut and created a bit more space, so I'm happy. One of the great advantages of a tunnel tent is that you tend to get very nice, big, large front vestibules. Really nice and deep, well sheltered from the weather, so plenty of space for cooking and storing gear. Now, I don't feel like me. I always hang up my wet gear inside the vestibule, never inside the inner, because I don't want the extra moisture and risk of condensation inside the inner. So wet clothes go in the vestibule, but on a tunnel tent, it's difficult to know where to hang them up, really. They can get in the way. So I've created a couple of hanging lines using bungee and clips. I'll show you them now. Very simply, I've got a small length of bungee. I would say this is about 20 centimeters long, with a little hook at the end. I've attached it to one of these points, and then hook it up out of the way over another one, and that gives me a nice area where I can string things up. I usually use that for my wet cagoule, over trousers, gloves, whatever it may be, rubbish bags perhaps, anything needs to be kept out of the way, off the ground, so it can get some air and hopefully dry out a bit overnight. And I've got another one the other side as well. Even though it's nice and spacious in here, it is quite nice to be able to hang things up off the floor of the tent. Now in this tent there is a hanging up sort of loop at the front end, but there's nothing to attach a line to down at the foot of the tent, and that's quite a common problem. So I've got a neat solution for you, and here it is. It's this little clip. I'll put the details in the video description, and in this case I've attached it to this seam. There are two reasons for that. Firstly, because it's a relatively strong point on the inner, but secondly because it's slightly thicker, and that allows the teeth of the clip to get a better purchase, if you like, and be slightly stronger. Up from there the line runs up to the attachment point at the front of the tent, and I can tension it. I put in a loop which I can tension with a little cord grip, so I can lower or raise the line according to what's on it. What do I keep on here? How you ask? Well, things like head torches, warm clothes that I want to be able to find easily in the night and without scrabbling around on the floor of the tent. Any items that just need airing, shall we say, socks. And also I hang my empty stuff bags over this line just to keep them out of the way, and so that I can find them easily when I'm packing up in the morning. And because it's a clip, I can move it around. I can put it up in the middle or move it to the other side, just depending really. Something that saved me countless times in the hills is that I have a little Carabiner style clip or whatever on the handle of the tent bag, and that means that I can clip the peg bag and the pole bag, footprint bag, whatever, all together so that I don't lose them, or perhaps I could lose them all at the same time. There's one last little modification that I use on this Taihang. I'm particularly proud of it because it's so simple and so easy. Now, this tent does come with a footprint, but it only extends beneath the living area from the foot as far as the front hoop. It doesn't extend into the front porch, which I think is a real shame. For the want of a bit of extra fabric, having a footprint in the vestibule would be really useful. And I like that idea that when you get in and out of the tent, you've got a dry zone where you can sit down, take off your boots and generally operate. So I thought, how can I get a footprint extended into the front vestibule? I'll tell you what I've done. So I unclipped the footprint from these rear pegging out points, and I moved the attachment on the footprint forward so it now attaches where the rear hoop attaches. So basically that allows me to move it forward by, let's say, 1 meter or so. So that'll mean that this front corner of the footprint can move forward 1 meter or so into the front vestibule. Ta-da! So no extra expense, no need to get anything specially made. And I've now got a good footprint extending into the vestibule. Now, different makes will have different sizes, and I've had to add a little bit of a loop on the front pegging out points just to allow the footprint to reach, because this rear area is slightly smaller than this front area. So I've had to extend those points just a little bit, but look what I've got. Now, of course, I have sacrificed. There's no footprint under this end of the inner, but I don't think that's a worrying thing, because frankly, that's where my feet are and various bits of clutter when I'm in the tent. It isn't an area of high wear or load, so I'm not too worried about protecting that part of the ground sheet of the tent. Much more useful to have an area here in the vestibule that I can use and be dry. So here we are with all my modifications, pegging out points in the middle of the side panels, much stronger pegs, color-coded attachment points at the front of the tent, a reinforced guy line on the inside of the tent. It's much more taut now. We've got a good footprint in the vestibule. We've got a hanging line inside and we've got hanging lines on the outside as well. So I think with those modifications together, we've taken the basic tunnel tent design and moved it to another level. The tent's going to perform even better, especially in bad weather. It's going to be much more practical to use inside. So those are my suggestions for now of how to modify and improve your lightweight tunnel backpacking tent. Hope you like them. Hope some of them might be useful for you. If you've got any thoughts, comments or suggestions of your own, I'd love to hear them. And in the meantime, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.